Hey everybody, David Schuller. Welcome back to Rules of the Road podcast. Today is the third episode in our series of 8 when it comes to setting goals. So last episode, we went ahead and went over the specific component in the S.M.A.R.T.E.R method, and today we're going to go ahead and go over the measurable component. So let's get into it. Why is being able to measure progress important? Well, simple. If you can't measure it, you can't understand it. And if you can't understand it, you can't validate it and you can't improve it. So, this is where having a sub goals, which is something we're going to go ahead and go over today, and also an accountability journal of some sort are gold. They take a lot of the misconceptions out of any emotions you might have and also inconsistencies that you have when it comes to tracking. So, how do you measure a goal? Well, you could use an app, or but we're going to go ahead and try to focus on doing it manually because with the ease of apps, it takes a lot of the guesswork and a lot of the thinking out of things sometimes. But what you really need to do is you need to learn to do it manually, no matter which route you end up taking in the end. So to do it manually, what you need is you need to assign measurable units to your goals. And so by doing this, what you're going to do is you're going to make a progression chart so that way you can check, every box along the way whenever you hit a certain point. As I mentioned, how do all of these components tie into each other? This is being one where it's set and it's specific, but it's also fine-tuned and officially established and time bound. So what you need to do is you must have an end date to your goal, so that way you can reverse engineer your progression chart by having your desired result where you work in small increments up to where you are the day that you're making your goal to start. So if your goal is to lose 20 pounds in 4 months and you're already 2 months in and you've only lost about 5 pounds, then it's time to start reassessing things and kind of get back on track, which is part of evaluate and readjust. So, how would this look as an example? Okay, so let's go back to the weight loss example. It's July 1st, you weigh 215, and you want to go ahead and weigh 195 by November 1st. So, what you're going to do is you're going to take, your the weight that you want to lose and you're going to divide it by your allotted time period. And so what you do is you count up the weeks, and July 1st to November 1st for 2020, it ends up being about 17 and a half weeks. So then what you're going to do is you're going to take your 20 pounds, divide it by 17.5, and then that way you're going to see how much you need to lose per week, which ends up being about 1.14 pounds per week. So that way you can incrementally set, your goals each week. What if you want to not lose weight and say you want to get a faster run time or something? Well, so if you take this method, you can change the values and change it around, whether it's you want to get a faster run time or say you want to learn a new skill, and apply the same parameters of this method and process it's still the same. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of great apps out there and also programs that do this, and that's fine, but really take the time to learn how to do it manually, so that way you don't become reliant exclusively on the technology and you have a deeper understanding. Now I'm going to go ahead and go on to what's known as the Pareto Principle, more commonly known as the 80-20 principle. And I'm going to do, an in-depth episode on this sometime in the future, but this is a principle that helps identify, cause and effect, and kind of also sort of identifies strengths and weaknesses in a ratio. So basically, what it is if you take 80% of your results, the 80% of those results are going to come from 20% of your effort. And, in a business sense, it's like 80% of your profit comes from 20% of your product. And, well, being a high school wrestling coach, I'm going to, go ahead and point this example into wrestling again. So basically, how the hell does this work for wrestling? Easy. 80% of your points are going to come from 20% of your moves. Okay, so how the hell does that make any sense? Well, think of all the types of moves there are in wrestling. Okay, and okay, let's go ahead and narrow it down to say takedowns. How many moves are there still? You have double leg, outside sweep single, low single, high crotch, ankle pick, inside trip, head throw, lateral throw, arm throw, and those are just the ones. I'm gonna stop right there. And now, out of all those moves, how many do you do, and then how many do you focus on? Just to kind of narrow it down. Well, 20% is 1 in 5, so go ahead and pick your top 5. So go ahead and narrow it down. Say double leg, sweep single, ankle pick, slide by snap down, and head throw. So out of those 5, your favorite ends up being the sweep single because that's where most of your points come from. And so, do you focus on the moves where you get your points, or do you focus on the moves where you don't get your points? Well, the short answer is both. If your sweep single is an 8, and let's say your double leg is a 5, and your ankle peak is a 6, do you try to make your sweep single better, or do you try to close that gap a little bit to make your other moves better? Well, truth be told, is you want to kind of keep that ratio the same, because especially in sports, people are studying film, and they're going to know that if you predominantly hit this move, people are going to set up an offense, or I'm sorry, a defense to that move. So you need to actually make all of your moves better, if that makes any sense. You want to kind of keep that ratio the same. You keep your money move sharp, but also raise all the others to be more efficient as well. Everyone in sports has pretty much heard the phrase trust the process, or some sort of form of it. And what this basically means is that things might look bad now, but there's a plan in place to make things better. And where this comes from is this comes from the the 76ers, the basketball team, and they were going through a really horrendous rebuilding period. But that was like the GM or somebody kept saying, "Hey, you know what? There's a plan for that. There's a process. Trust the process," and they ended up getting better. So how does subgoals fit in? Well, they become systems that help in the process of completing your main overall goal. Think of it like this. Think of it as your overall goal as a meal where you're going to be having a bunch of friends and family come over, and you're the cook. So in order to you cook this full course meal, all the sides, all the appetizers and desserts, you're going to need a cookbook because you don't know how to cook. So think of the process as this cookbook, and all the types of recipes that are ranging from appetizers to sides to your main course to your desserts. Those recipes are your systems, and these systems are subgoals, whatever. In this case, like I said, they're the recipes in this cookbook, which is also the process. So not every recipe is going to work for every type of dish, but you can't accomplish every type of goal by doing the same thing, if that makes any sense. Well, using the state champion in wrestling as an example for your main goal, what are some things that you would need to do in order to get there? Well, some of your sub goals, and in no particular order, could be, say you want to have a winning percentage of 90% with 0 losses in your section when you head into your sectional tournament. So that way you're at least the number 1 or number 2 seed. Another one could be, you want to be able to scramble for 2 minutes. You would want to be able to do, 100 push-ups, 20 pull-ups, and 100 V-ups without stopping in between each one. Another one that would actually be pretty important is that, say you want to win half of the tournaments that you compete in, but you want to place in 100% of them. Another one could be, that you want to have at least a 3.0 GPA. So that way you're not going to be, you're not worried about being academically ineligible for having a failing grade. That way you can actually kind of give yourself a little buffer if you do have, a bad week, a bad section in a class, fail a huge test, or whatever. Another one that's actually pretty important is you want to stay out of trouble at home and also at school, because you don't want to be suspended. You certainly don't want to be expelled, and you don't want to be grounded. So you can't compete if you're not there. And another one would be, health and hygiene. You want to take care of your physical health. If you're hurt, you want to take the the necessary precautions. Also work on your mental health, so that way if you do get into a funk, you're not you don't give up. But then also hygiene, especially in sports, wrestling being one, is that there's a lot of skin infections and a whole bunch of different type of funk out there. So you don't want to get anything of that, because obviously if you're contagious, you can't wrestle. And right there, I went ahead and I came up with about seven or so sub goals. Like I said, try to have at least 5. Anything less than 4, it's probably not enough. You can find some more areas to work on. Don't make it so generic that it's just that. But you don't want to have too many. I did 7. You could probably scrap, 2 of those. But anything more than 7, you're that way. You're gonna probably overwhelm and overload yourself a little bit, and that might could distract you from your main goal. And, with that kind of brings us to the end of today's episode. So please come back tomorrow when we go over the achievable portion. There's a lot of good stuff in there, a lot of personal stuff in there. And, I hope you can take a lot of that stuff to heart. And in closing, as we speak about, measuring time, look at where you spend your time right now. You're going to spend the time doing things that you care about. Okay, how many hours do you spend playing video games versus learning a new skill? How many hours do you spend laying around rather than you do working out? If you aren't eating appropriately to your body size and your goals, and you're not working out, 5 to 10 hours a week. Yeah, there's the 30-minute workouts, but let's be real here. You're probably not doing enough. Heck, it's hard to believe that you're unhappy with how fat you might feel, that you are. But if you at least don't get off the couch and go for walks at least every morning before it starts getting hot out. Or how can you learn about learning a new skill, or how can you care about learning a new skill, when the only effort you're putting into is getting it to the next level in a video game. Information, it can be found anywhere these days. There's books online, there's libraries, they still exist. There's how-to videos all over the internet, master classes by experts. I mean, hey, guys, you can even listen to podcasts, okay? So this isn't the Matrix. You just can't learn by uploading it into your brain. And so until next time, later.